There was no trial, no lawyer, no second chance to explain yourself. You woke up that morning the same as everyone else in your group. You shared the fire. You ate from the same kill. You carried the same tools your father taught you to make. But by nightfall, you were alone. Not because you wanted to be. Not because you wandered off. But because you broke a rule no one ever wrote down, and now the group had turned their backs. Literally. They won't look at you. They won't speak your name. And if you try to follow them when they move camp at dawn, they'll drive you off with stones. What did you do? Maybe you touched something sacred. Maybe you took food before it was shared. Maybe you slept with the wrong person. Maybe you just laughed at the wrong time during a grief ritual. It doesn't matter. The punishment is the same. You are nothing now. And here's the part that should unsettle you. This wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was something colder. It was the group performing maintenance. Like pulling a rotting tooth. Like burning infected cloth. You became dangerous the moment you violated the invisible code, and the only way to keep the group safe was to cut you out completely. No anger. No hate. Just amputation. This is what happened when ancient humans broke rules. And what's strange, what should make you pause, is how little has changed. Let's start with what we know. For most of human existence, we lived in small groups. 20 to 50 people, maybe fewer. Everyone knew everyone. There were no strangers. No police. No courts. No jails. So how did order exist? Through something anthropologists call social death. If you violated group norms, norms around sharing, around respect, around kinship, around the sacred, you didn't get punished with violence. You got punished with absence. The group stopped seeing you. They stopped responding when you spoke. Stopped acknowledging your presence. Stopped including you in food distribution, in decision-making, in the warmth of the fire at night. You were still physically there. But socially, you had been erased. And here's what makes this so brutal. In a world where survival depended entirely on the group, this was a death sentence. Not immediate, but inevitable. You couldn't hunt large game alone. Couldn't defend yourself from predators alone. Couldn't gather enough resources, build adequate shelter, or stay warm through winter alone. The group was your immune system, your supply chain, your entire world. And now you were outside it. Some people tried to survive anyway. Archaeological evidence from Paleolithic Europe shows isolated remains, single bodies buried far from known group sites, with signs of chronic malnutrition, unhealed injuries, and signs of psychological stress in the bones. These were the exiled. They lasted weeks, maybe months. But almost none survived long-term. Because here's the deeper truth. Humans aren't just social animals. We're obligately social. Our brains are wired to need other people the way our lungs need air. Isolation doesn't just hurt. It damages us at a biological level. Studies on modern humans show that prolonged isolation triggers the same brain regions as physical pain. It increases cortisol, suppresses immune function, triggers paranoia, hallucinations, and cognitive decline. And this wasn't a bug in our psychology. It was a feature. Our ancestors needed to fear exile more than they feared death, because exile was death. So evolution built that fear deep into the architecture of the self. The rules you could break varied by culture. But the punishment was universal. In some groups, the worst violation was hoarding resources. Taking more than your share, hiding food, refusing to give when others were hungry. In others, it was sexual transgression, sleeping with a relative, violating incest taboos, or breaking pair bond rules that kept the group stable. In still others, it was ritual contamination. Touching the dead incorrectly. Speaking during sacred silence. Entering spaces reserved for elders or shamans. But across all of them, the response was the same. You are no longer one of us. And what's eerie, what threads through to the present, is that we still do this. We just dress it up differently. Think about what happens in modern society when someone is cancelled. When someone violates the moral codes of their community, whether online, at work, in social circles. They aren't arrested. They aren't fined. They're ignored, unfollowed, blocked, uninvited. Their voice stops mattering. Their presence becomes uncomfortable. The language has changed. The scale has changed. But the mechanism is identical. We still exile people by making them socially invisible. And just like in ancient times, the punishment works because it strikes at the core of what we are, creatures who need to belong. There's a case study that haunts anthropologists. In the 1960s, researchers documented a practice among the beauty people of Central Africa. When someone violated group harmony, usually through selfishness or persistent conflict, the group would perform a ritual. They would gather in a circle. The violator would stand in the center. And one by one, each person would turn their back. No words. No explanation. Just the slow, silent turning of bodies. The person in the center could speak, could plead, could try to explain. But no one would turn around. The ritual would end. Life would resume. But the message was absolute. You are alone now. Most people, within days, would leave the group voluntarily. Because staying in a place where you were unseen was worse than facing the forest alone. And here's where it gets philosophically heavy. The rule you broke didn't have to be written down because everyone felt it. The boundaries of acceptable behavior weren't taught through lecture. They were taught through 1,000 tiny social cues, through who got smiled at and who got silence, through who was included and who was left at the edge of the firelight. You learned the rules the same way you learned language, by living inside them. And because of that, when you broke one, you knew. There was no confusion. No defense of, I didn't know. You knew. And so did everyone else. That's why the group's response could be so cold. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. You had stepped outside the boundary of what it meant to be human in that specific place, in that specific group. And the only way to restore balance was to make that separation visible. Let's go deeper into what the exile actually experienced. Imagine it. You wake up the morning after the violation. Maybe you didn't sleep. Maybe you lay awake all night replaying what happened, searching for a way to undo it. You approach the fire. People are there, preparing food, talking quietly. You sit down. No one looks at you. You speak. You say good morning. You try to make a joke, to ease the tension. Nothing. Not hostility. Not anger. Just nothing. You reach for food. Someone moves it slightly away. Not dramatically. Just enough. You try to help with a task, sharpening a tool, preparing a hide. Your hands are ignored. Someone else takes over as if you aren't there. Hours pass like this. Then days. You start to doubt your own presence. You begin to feel like a ghost. And here's the psychological trap. You can't leave, because leaving means certain death. But you can't stay, because staying means existing in a space where you have no reality. Some people broke. They would throw themselves at the feet of elders, begging for forgiveness, for a way back in. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes a ritual of reintegration was possible, a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a symbolic punishment, a feast of reconciliation. But sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the violation was too deep. Sometimes the group decided that trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt. And then you had a choice. Walk into the wilderness and die relatively quickly, or stay on the edges of the group and die slowly, watching life continue without you. Most chose the wilderness. There's a skeleton found in France, dated to around 25,000 years ago. Male, mid-30s, buried alone in a shallow grave far from any settlement. His bones show signs of prolonged starvation. Healed fractures that were never set properly. Teeth worn down from chewing raw hides, probably for lack of other food. But here's the detail that stops you. His grave was deliberately oriented away from the direction of the nearest known group site. Even in death, he was turned away. Whoever buried him, maybe himself, in his final hours, or maybe someone who found him, made sure he remained exiled. The rule followed him past death. Now ask yourself, what rule would you have broken? It's easy to imagine you'd be safe. That you'd follow the codes, stay within bounds, never risk exile. But the truth is, you wouldn't have known all the rules. Some were obvious. Some were subtle. Some shifted depending on context, on season, on the mood of the group. And some rules only became visible when you broke them. You wouldn't have gotten a handbook. You would have gotten silence, and then absence, and then the cold realization that you were alone. And here's the modern echo that should make you uncomfortable. We still live like this. We still enforce invisible rules. We still punish through exclusion. We still exile people from belonging when they violate the unspoken codes of the groups we're part of. The punishment still works because the fear is still the same. We are still creatures who would rather endure almost anything than be truly alone. So what really happened when an ancient human broke a rule? They discovered the edge of what it meant to be human. They learned that belonging isn't a right. It's a negotiation. A fragile agreement between you and the people around you that you will uphold certain behaviors, certain values, certain silences. And when that agreement breaks, so do you. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. And humans were never meant to survive alone. If you've ever felt the sting of being excluded, of being unseen, of saying something and having it land in silence, you felt the same thing they felt. That fear isn't new. It's older than cities. Older than writing. Older than agriculture. It's the fear that kept us alive. And it's still here. What rule are you most afraid of breaking?